Captain Jack Morrison stood motionless on the bridge of the UES Defiant, his weathered hands clasped behind his back as he watched humanity's defense fleet burn. The massive view screen before him painted his face in the orange glow of distant explosions, each flash marking another human vessel lost to the hegemony's relentless advance. Tactical analysis complete, Captain. AI's calm voice filled the bridge. The ship's AI projected a holographic overlay across the view screen, highlighting the movements of the hegemony's capital ships. They're deploying in a Carthage pattern. Historical records suggest they're preparing for a full planetary bombardment of New Athens colony. Morrison's jaw tightened. The Carthage pattern, named after what the hegemony had done to humanity's first extrasolar colony. How many civilians still on the surface? 8,300,000, Captain. Evacuation is only 20% complete. Around him, the bridge crew worked in tense silence. They all knew what those numbers meant. Lieutenant Sarah Hayes at Tactical hadn't looked away from her console in hours, her fingers dancing across the holographic controls as she tracked every enemy movement. Commander Rodriguez at Ops kept the Defiant's revolutionary quantum shadow drive purring at minimal power, just enough to keep them hidden in the debris field of what had once been humanity's proudest battleships. Message from Fleet Command, encrypted channel. Communications Officer Chen announced, his voice tight. Priority Alpha. Morrison nodded. In my ready room. He turned to his XO. Commander Rodriguez, you have the bridge. The ready room was barely 10 steps from his command chair, but each step felt heavier than the last. Morrison knew what this message would contain. They'd wargamed this scenario 100 times in the months leading up to the hegemony's invasion. He'd just hoped they'd have more time. The message was brief, text only. 4 lines that would decide the fate of humanity. FLASHTYAFIC. IE's ONL. Operation Long Shadow is go. Hail O8C2 ordinate is 8TH. Go did speed, Defiant. Morrison closed his eyes for a moment, letting the weight of those words sink in. When he opened them again, his expression was steel. Back on the bridge, his crew looked up expectantly. They knew that face. It meant everything was about to change. Lieutenant Hayes, plot a course through the hegemony fleet. Commander Rodriguez, ready the quantum shadow drive for full power. He settled into his command chair, feeling the familiar embrace of its tactical restraints. AIA, begin Operation Long Shadow protocols. Course plotted, sir, Hayes reported. But there are 67 capital ships between us and the coordinates. Morrison allowed himself a grim smile. Then it's a good thing they can't see us, isn't it? The Defiant came alive around them, its quantum shadow drive humming with power that shouldn't exist according to the hegemony's understanding of physics. On the view screen, another human destroyer died in nuclear fire, its death providing the perfect cover for their movement. All hands, battle stations, Morrison ordered, his voice carried to every corner of the ship. What we do here, what we're about to attempt, will determine whether humanity has a future among the stars. The hegemony thinks they've won. They think they understand the limits of what's possible. Today, we prove them wrong. The Defiant slipped from its hiding place like a shark emerging from the depths. Its quantum field bent light and gravity around its hull, making it as invisible to the hegemony sensors as a ghost. As they accelerated toward their objective, Morrison watched the enemy fleet growing larger on the view screen. Sir, Hayes whispered, they haven't detected us. No, Morrison replied softly, they haven't. And by the time they do, everything they think they know about humanity will change. The Defiant sailed silently through the heart of the largest alien fleet humanity had ever seen, carrying its secret cargo toward a destination that would change the galaxy forever. 3 weeks into Operation Long Shadow, Morrison stood over the tactical display as another hegemony supply convoy disappeared from their sensors. He didn't need to give the order. Hayes's fingers were already dancing across her console, executing their now perfected attack pattern. Quantum shadow drive engage. Rodriguez reported. "We're running silent." The Defiant sliced through space like a knife through silk, its quantum field bending reality around the ship until they simply ceased to exist in normal spacetime. Morrison had stopped trying to understand the physics behind it weeks ago. What mattered was that it worked, and it was their edge against an empire that hadn't innovated in centuries. "Target locked," Hayes announced. "Leading transport is in optimal position." Morrison nodded. "Execute." The Defiant phased back into normal space directly above the Hegemony transport's engine core. Before the alien vessel could even register their presence, Hayes had launched their newest weapon, a quantum-tipped torpedo that passed through the transport's shields as if they didn't exist. "Clean hit," Araya confirmed. "Enemy vessel's power grid is cascading. Their quantum crystalline matrix is interesting." Morrison raised an eyebrow. Araya had been showing more curiosity lately, especially about the Hegemony's technology. "Interesting how?" "The failure pattern. It's familiar, almost like multiple ships dropping out of FTL." Chen's urgent voice cut through the conversation. "Sir, it's the 7th Hunter Fleet." The tactical display lit up with new contacts, dozens of Hegemony warships appearing in a perfect sphere around their position. At their center, a massive dreadnought emerged from FTL, its hull bristling with sensor arrays and weapon ports. They'd been tracking the quantum wake, Rodriguez realized, setting up an ambush. Morrison felt a smile tugging at his lips. "No, Commander. They've been tracking our attacks, trying to establish a pattern. And now they think they have us trapped." He turned to his crew. "Show me their command ship's sensor configuration, Araya." The AI projected a detailed scan. The dreadnought was covered in crystalline sensor nodes, the Hegemony's most advanced detection technology. "Perfect," Morrison whispered. "Hayes, load quantum torpedoes, all tubes." Rodriguez, plot a micro-jump through their formation, directly through the dreadnought's sensor blind spot. Chen, prepare to broadcast on all frequencies the moment we reappear. His crew worked with practiced efficiency, understanding clicking into place as they sought his plan. The Hegemony thought they were hunting a wounded animal. They were about to learn how wrong they were. Jump in 3, 2, 1. The Defiant vanished, reappearing seconds later less than a kilometer from the dreadnought's hull. Before the massive vessel could react, Hayes launched their entire spread of quantum torpedoes, not at the ship itself, but at its sensor arrays. "Broadcasting now," Chen announced with fierce satisfaction. Morrison's voice carried across every frequency the Hegemony used. "To the 7th Hunter Fleet, thank you for gathering your most advanced sensor technology in one place. It made our job much easier." The torpedoes struck home. Each crystalline sensor node shattered in sequence, their quantum matrices overloading in a cascade of blue-white energy that rippled across the dreadnought's hull. The massive ship went blind, its defensive systems crashing as the feedback loop Morrison had counted on tore through its network. "Secondary explosions throughout their fleet," Hayes reported. "The sensor feedback is spreading through their command network. Their entire detection grid is failing." Morrison watched as the mighty Hunter fleet fell into chaos, their ships suddenly blind and cut off from central command. "Now they know," he said quietly. "The hunters have become the hunted." "Sir," Araya's voice held something close to excitement. "I've analyzed the failure pattern in their quantum matrix. There's something about their technology, something familiar that I can't quite place." Morrison filed that away for later. Right now, they had a fleet to dismantle. Helm, attack pattern Delta. Let's show them how humanity hunts. The Defiant dove back into battle, no longer running, no longer hiding. Against any other enemy, taking on an entire fleet would have been suicide. But the Hegemony had forgotten how to adapt, how to innovate, and that would be their undoing. The Hegemony data vault loomed before them, a crystalline fortress floating in high orbit around one of the Empire's most heavily defended worlds. Under normal circumstances, infiltrating such a facility would have been impossible, But these weren't normal circumstances. Remind me again why we're doing this, Rodriguez muttered, his hand steady on the helm despite his protest. Morrison studied the holographic model ARIA had constructed of the vault's defenses, because after our last encounter, ARIA had detected something in their sensor technology that shouldn't be possible, and I want to know what it is. Quantum signature analysis complete, ARIA announced. The vault's defensive grid operates on the same principles as our shadow drive. The mathematical constants are identical, Captain. Hayes looked up from tactical. That's impossible. We invented the quantum shadow drive 6 months ago. Did we? Morrison wondered aloud. Or did we rediscover it? The Defiant glided through the station's outer defense perimeter, its quantum field rendering it invisible to the crystalline sensors. They'd timed their approach perfectly. The nearby sun's radiation would mask any minute fluctuations in their cloak. Docking tube extended, Rodriguez reported. We're locked onto their maintenance airlock. Morrison nodded to the boarding team. 4 of his best, led by Lieutenant Commander Park. Remember, we're here for data only. No encounters if we can avoid it. The team disappeared into the docking tube, their adaptive camouflage suits blending perfectly with the station's interior. Morrison watched their progress through the helmet feeds, tension building with each passing moment. Multiple ships dropping out of FTL, Hayes announced suddenly. Hegemony pattern, heavy cruiser group. Morrison's jaw tightened. Routine patrol. No, sir. They're moving with purpose. I think, sir, they're establishing a search grid. They knew we were coming, Rodriguez realized. Morrison studied the tactical display. The cruisers were arranging themselves in a spherical pattern around the vault, the same formation the Hunter fleet had used. But this time, something was different. ARIA analyzed their formation. What are we missing? The eye was silent for a moment. Captain, they're not using standard sensor arrays. These ships are equipped with. Captain, these readings can't be correct. They're using technology that matches Earth's theoretical quantum physics papers from 3 years ago. Sir, Park's voice crackled through the comm. We found something. Transmitting data now. But there's something else. Where in their central archive? And these crystals. They're covered in writing. Morrison leaned forward. What kind of writing? That's just it, sir. It's English, ancient English, but definitely human script. The implications hit Morrison like a physical blow. Before he could respond, Hayes's console erupted in warnings. Energy spike. The vault's crystals are activating. All of them. Through the viewport, Morrison watched as the crystalline fortress began to pulse with familiar blue-white energy. The same energy their quantum drive produced. Get our people out of there. Now, Morrison ordered. Rodriguez, stand by for emergency jump. The boarding team sprinted back through the airlock just as the vault's quantum field began to intensify. On the tactical display, the hegemony cruisers were closing in, their formation tightening. Sir, Ari's voice held an unfamiliar note of awe. I've decoded the initial data burst from the vault. The crystals, they're not just similar to our technology. They are our technology, created by humans thousands of years ago. Morrison watched as the hegemony ships drew closer, their own crystalline weapons charging. Can you prove it? Yes. The vault's database contains the original engineering schematics. They've been treating technical manuals as religious texts, following the instructions without understanding the principles behind them. A plan began to form in Morrison's mind. Upload everything you can. Rodriguez, plot a course through their formation. But this time, I want them to see us leave. Sir? Morrison smiled grimly. The hegemony built their entire empire on stolen human technology they never understood. It's time we showed them what these crystals can really do when you understand the science behind them. The Defiant's quantum drive hummed to life, but this time Morrison had ARIA modulate the field. As they accelerated toward the hegemony fleet, their ship left a deliberate wake of quantum energy, energy that matched the vault's crystals perfectly. Let them see, Morrison thought. Let them wonder what other secrets humanity has reclaimed. Your bounty's up to 6 trillion credits, Dr. Quinn Hayes announced as she stepped onto the Defiance Bridge. The hegemony's offering enough raw materials to build a Dyson sphere for anyone who can capture this ship. Morrison turned from the tactical display, studying their new guest. The former hegemony quantum physicist looked more like a warrior now, dressed in battle-worn stealth armor, her dark hair pulled back in a practical braid. The neural interface scar on her temple marked her as a former member of the Empire's elite scientific caste. Exactly the kind of ally they needed. Good thing we're impossible to capture, Morrison replied. Did you bring the data? Quinn pulled a crystalline data core from her pack. Everything I could salvage from the research facility on Nexus 9, including why the hegemony's so desperate to destroy your ship specifically. Aria's holographic avatar materialized next to them. The quantum signatures match. Their entire FTL network is built on the same principles as our drive. Not just similar principles, Quinn corrected, plugging the data core into a console. Your quantum shadow drive is a perfect reproduction of the original human design, the first one created in over 10,000 years that actually improves on the base technology. The bridge crew exchanged glances as technical schematics filled their screens. The crystalline technology that powered the hegemony's empire wasn't just similar to human designs. It was human technology, copied without understanding and treated as divine relics. How many others know about this? Morrison asked. More every day. I've got resistance cells on 50 systems now, all sharing information through quantum encrypted channels. The hegemony's iron grip was already cracking before you showed up. Now, Quinn's eyes gleamed. Now we have proof their gods were human. Before Morrison could respond, proximity alerts blared. Multiple ships dropping out of FTL. Hayes called from tactical. Hegemony signatures. No, wait. These are different. A dozen small vessels materialized around the Defiant, their designs a mix of various species technology. Morrison tensed, but Quinn stepped forward. It's okay, she said. These are my people, representatives from every major resistance cell in this sector. They're here because of what your ship represents, proof that the hegemony can be beaten. Morrison studied the tactical display. The ships were arranged in a defensive pattern around the Defiant, but their weapons were powered down. A gesture of trust. Incoming transmission, Chen announced. They're broadcasting on. This can't be right. They're using an old Earth frequency. Put it through, Morrison ordered. A chorus of voices filled the bridge, speaking in various alien languages as their universal translators struggled to keep up. But the message was clear. They were ready to fight. Quinn moved to Morrison's side. The hegemony maintains control through technological dependence. Every species in the Empire relies on their crystalline network for everything from FTL travel to basic power generation. But now we can show them how it really works, Morrison finished. Teach them to understand the technology instead of just using it blindly. Exactly. Quinn's eyes met his. Your ship isn't just a weapon, Captain. It's a symbol, proof that innovation beats blind faith every time. New alerts flashed across the tactical display. A massive hegemony battle group had just dropped out of FTL at the edge of the system. Looks like we'll get to test that theory, Morrison said. Hayes, coordinate targeting solutions with our new allies. Rodriguez, prepare tow. Wait, Quinn interrupted. Look at their formation. The way they're arranging their crystalline nodes. I've seen this before, in the ancient texts. They're not here to fight. Morrison studied the display. The hegemony ships were indeed arranging themselves in an unusual pattern, their crystalline arrays aligned in a complex geometric formation. They're trying to create a quantum resonance cascade, Quinn explained. If they succeed, they'll disable any technology based on the original human designs within 10 light years. Morrison smiled grimly. Then it's time to show them what these crystals can really do when you understand the science behind them. Area, begin Quantum Interference Protocol Delta. Let's teach them why humanity's the one species in the galaxy that never stops innovating. The battle that followed would be remembered as the day the resistance became a revolution. The ruins stretched for kilometers beneath the surface of the Forbidden World, a vast complex of laboratories and research facilities that had been ancient when the hegemony was young. Morrison stood in what had once been the central control room, watching Quinn work at a crystalline terminal that still hummed with power after countless millennia. "This is impossible," Quinn whispered, her fingers flying over the ancient interface. "These power readings, this facility is still running on its original quantum core." Morrison studied the holographic displays that filled the chamber, showing technical schematics that looked eerily similar to the Defiance engine designs. Not impossible, just human. "Sir," Hayes called from across the chamber. "We've got more translation data from Area. You need to see this." The tactical officer's excitement was palpable as she projected a new hologram, a recording that made both Morrison and Quinn freeze in place. It showed human scientists working with the same crystalline technology that now powered the hegemony's empire. "Date stamp confirms it," Quinn said, her voice thick with emotion. "This facility is over 50,000 years old. These were our ancestors, and they weren't just experimenting with quantum mechanics. They mastered it." Before Morrison could respond, Rodriguez's voice crackled over the comm. "Captain, we've got company. Multiple hegemony ships just dropped out of FTL in high orbit." "How many?" Morrison asked, already moving toward the facility's exit. "All of them, sir. It looks like they deployed their entire 7th Fleet. They're setting up a quarantine grid around the planet." Quinn grabbed a data core from the ancient terminal. "They know what we found. If this gets out, if people learn that their divine crystals were created by ancient humans, their entire empire crumbles," Morrison finished. "How much proof did you get?" Quinn held up the data core, its crystalline surface pulsing with stored information. "Everything. Original designs, research notes, even the quantum theory behind it all. This proves humanity didn't just create this technology. We understood it in ways the hegemony never has." The facility's lights flickered as distant explosions shook the ground. The hegemony was starting their bombardment, trying to bury the truth before it could spread. "Rodriguez," Morrison called as they ran for the extraction point. "What's the status of that little surprise we planted in their sensor network?" "Ready on your command, sir. The quantum virus is already spreading through their crystalline matrices. They won't be able to track us once we break orbit." They reached the Defiance landing zone just as the first heavy round started hitting the planet's surface. The ship's quantum drive was already spooling up, its familiar hum a stark contrast to the thunder of orbital bombardment. "Wait," Quinn said as they prepared for emergency launch. "There's something else in these records, something about the original design of the quantum drive." "Area, can you process this data?" The AI's avatar appeared, its expression showing an unusually human excitement. "Fascinating. The original drive design wasn't just meant for FTL travel. When properly configured, the quantum field could be used to..." A direct hit from the hegemony fleet rocked the ship, cutting off Aria's revelation. "Tell me later," Morrison ordered, strapping into his command chair. "Right now, we need to show them why copying technology you don't understand is a bad idea. Rodriguez, execute quantum jump on my mark." Quinn took the science station, her fingers dancing across the controls, converting the new data into tactical solutions. "Sir, according to these readings, we've barely scratched the surface of what this drive can do." Morrison allowed himself a grim smile as the hegemony fleet filled their viewport, their crystalline weapons charging for another barrage. "Then let's give them a demonstration. All hands, battle stations, time to show the galaxy what humanity can really do with our own technology." The Defiant rose through the atmosphere, its quantum field blazing with power that made the hegemony's stolen technology look like pale imitations. They weren't just reclaiming humanity's legacy. They were about to improve upon it. The High Hierarch's face contorted with rage on the massive view screen as Morrison delivered the killing blow, not with weapons, but with truth. "These are the original engineering schematics," Morrison said calmly, transmitting data across all frequencies as the Defiant hovered in plain view of the hegemony's sacred temple fleet, complete with timestamps, human signatures, and proof that your divine crystals were created in human laboratories 50,000 years ago. Blasphemy. The Hierarch spat, but Morrison could see the fear in his eyes. "Our gods gifted us this technology to rule the galaxy. Your gods were human scientists." Quinn stepped into view beside Morrison, her presence a deliberate show of defiance. "And they didn't give you anything. The hegemony stole fragments of human technology and built an empire on plagiarism. Behind them, Aria's holographic avatar monitored the transmissions spread across the quantum network. The data package has reached 87% of all major hegemony worlds. They cannot stop its propagation without shutting down their entire communication system." Morrison watched as the Hierarch's composure cracked further. The religious leader's hands were shaking as he reached for his emergency controls, probably to order their destruction. But they had planned for that. "Lieutenant Hayes," Morrison called without taking his eyes off the screen. "Execute Operation Revelation. Across the hegemony fleet, crystalline sensor arrays and weapon systems suddenly pulse with familiar blue-white energy. The quantum virus they'd planted weeks ago activated, forcing every crystal to display its original human manufacturing data in brilliant holographic form." "Sir," Rodriguez reported with barely contained excitement, "we're getting reports from Quinn's resistance network. Riots have broken out on 12 major hegemony worlds. Their own military is starting to question orders." The Hierarch's response was immediate and devastating. "Execute any who question the divine truth. Destroy all who spread these human lies." "And there it is," Morrison said softly. He opened a new channel, broadcasting directly to every ship in the hegemony fleet. "You heard your leader. He would rather kill his own people than admit the truth. Ask yourselves, would true gods demand blind faith over understanding? Would they fear questions?" Quinn stepped closer to Morrison, her hand brushing his shoulder as she addressed the fleet. "I was like you once, a true believer, but I chose to understand rather than simply believe. The coordinates I'm transmitting will lead you to proof. Ancient human facilities still running on their original power cores. See for yourselves." The effect was electric. Across the tactical display, ships began breaking formation. Some jumped to FTL, heading for the coordinates. Others simply powered down their weapons, refusing to fire on their own people. "Quantum cascade detected," Aria announced. "The Temple Fleet's crystalline network is destabilizing." Their blind faith in the technology's divine nature prevented them from installing proper safety protocols. Morrison watched as the Hierarch's flagship began to lose power, its precious crystals turning against it. "We can help you," he offered, knowing the response but required by conscience to try. "We understand this technology in ways you never bothered to learn." The Hierarch's response was incandescent with rage. Better to die in holy fire than live with human heresy. He slammed his hand down on a control panel, and his flagship's crystals began to overload. "Multiple ships breaking orbit," Hayes reported. "The Temple fleet is scattered. Sir, revolution has broken out on 37 major worlds and counting." Quinn's hand found Morrison's, squeezing it tight as they watched the Hierarch ship tear itself apart. "The hardest part comes next," she said quietly. "Rebuilding after the faith shatters." Morrison nodded, thinking of the ancient facility they discovered. "Then we'll do what humanity does best. We'll innovate, we'll improve, and this time, we'll share the knowledge freely." The Defiant's quantum drive hummed as they prepared to jump to the next target. The revolution was spreading faster than anyone had predicted, burning through the hegemony's ranks like wildfire through dry grass. Faith, they were proving, was no match for understanding, and humanity's greatest gift to the galaxy would be teaching others to understand rather than simply believe. The temple world of Crystallis hung in space like a jeweled ornament, its surface dotted with vast crystalline structures that pulsed with stolen power. The Defiant led a fleet of resistance ships through the debris field of what had once been the planet's outer defense grid, their victory so far almost too easy. "They're falling back to the inner sanctum," Quinn reported from her station, now permanently installed next to Tactical. "The remaining hegemony loyalists are gathering around the central temple." Morrison studied the tactical display, watching as enemy ships formed a desperate defensive sphere around the massive crystalline structure that dominated the planet's northern continent. "How many ships?" 317, Hayes answered. "All capital class. They've adapted their formations to resist our quantum virus." "They're learning?" Morrison mused. "Finally." "Too late," Quinn added, but her expression was troubled. "Jack, these readings from the central temple. The crystal matrix is unlike anything we've seen before. It's not just a copy of the ancient human tech. It's original." Araya finished. "The central temple appears to be built around one of the original human quantum cores. Its power output is concerning." Morrison felt the pieces click into place. "That's why they built their religious center here. They found an intact facility and built their whole faith around it." He turned to Quinn. "Can they activate it?" "They already are." Quinn's fingers flew across her console. "The power readings are off the scale. They're trying to trigger a quantum resonance cascade across their entire network." "Sir," Chen called from communications. "Message from the High Hierarchy." The Temple Master's face appeared on their view screen, his eyes wild with religious fervor. "You have corrupted the faithful, poisoned them with your human lies, but the gods themselves will burn this corruption from the galaxy." The tactical display erupted with warnings as energy readings from the central temple spiked impossibly high. "If that quantum cascade reaches critical mass," Quinn said urgently, "it'll destroy everything connected to their network. Billions will die when their technology fails." Morrison's mind raced through options. "Araya, you've had time to analyze the original designs we found. Can we stop this?" "Negative, Captain." But the AI's avatar flickered thoughtfully. "We might be able to redirect it. The Defiant's quantum drive is based on the same principles. If we can match frequencies, we could create a feedback loop," Quinn finished, excitement breaking through her concern. "Use their own cascade against them, but we'd need to get close, inside their defensive screen." Morrison looked at his crew, at Hayes's determined expression, Rodriguez's steady hands on the helm, Chen's quiet confidence, then at Quinn, brilliant and brave and believing in humanity's potential. "Hard to believe this all started with one ship against an empire," he said quietly. Quinn's hand found his shoulder. "It started with humans doing what they do best. Understanding instead of believing. Learning instead of worshipping." Morrison nodded. "Rodriguez, plot us a course through their fleet. Hayes, target their weak points. They're protecting crystals they think are divine, so they'll prioritize those over actual tactical positioning. Chen, signal our allies to draw off as many defenders as they can." "Quinn," she smiled, already calculating the quantum harmonics. "We'll only get one shot at this." The Defiant surged forward, its advanced drive singing with power as they dove into the heart of the enemy fleet. The resistance ships spread out behind them, engaging the hegemony defenders with precise strikes that forced them to break formation. Multiple direct hits, Hayes called as they punched through the first defensive layer. "Their crystal matrices are destabilizing. Quantum cascade approaching critical mass," Araya warned. "Temple power readings are beyond theoretical limits." Morrison watched as the central temple began to glow with blinding energy, its ancient human core awakening fully for the first time in 50,000 years. "Take us in, Rodriguez." right down their throat. The Defiant screamed toward the temple surface, its quantum field blazing like a newborn star as it prepared to meet ancient human technology with its modern descendant. They were about to find out who understood humanity's legacy better, those who worshipped it, or those who had reclaimed it through innovation and understanding. The light of quantum fire filled their view screen, and the galaxy held its breath. The quantum cascade roared around the Defiant like a storm of pure energy, reality itself twisting as ancient human technology clashed with its modern descendant. On the bridge, warning klaxons screamed as the ship's structural integrity strained against forces that shouldn't exist. Hull stress at 142% of maximum. Hayes shouted over the din. "We can't take much more of this." Morrison gripped his command chair, watching as the Central Temple's energy readings continued to spike. "Quinn, tell me you have something." Quinn's fingers danced across her console, sweat beading on her forehead as she worked to align their quantum frequencies. "The original core is fighting us. It's like it's alive, adapting to our attempts to interface." Because it is alive, Aria's avatar flickered as the ship's systems fluctuated. "Captain, I've decoded the original programming. The core wasn't just designed for power generation. It's a true quantum AI, far more advanced than anything we've created since." Understanding dawned in Quinn's eyes. That's why the hegemony could never fully control it. They weren't talking to it, just worshipping it. Morrison turned to Aria. "Can you communicate with it?" "Attempting connection now. But Captain, if I divert power to quantum communications, our defensive field will." "Do it," Morrison ordered. "Rodriguez, give her everything we've got. Hayes, reroute weapons power to shields." The Defiant shuddered as its quantum drive synchronized with the ancient core. On the tactical display, the hegemony fleet was breaking apart, their ship's crystals overloading as the cascade spread. "Connection established," Aria announced, her avatar steady now despite the chaos around them. "The core, it recognizes our quantum signature. It's been waiting, Captain. Waiting for humans who understand instead of merely believe." Morrison watched in awe as new data flooded their screens, secrets of quantum mechanics that the ancient humans had mastered, waiting 50,000 years to be rediscovered by their descendants. "Remarkable," Quinn breathed, reading the data. "They didn't just create this technology. They created it to evolve, to wait for beings capable of true understanding before revealing its full potential." "Multiple hegemony ships powering down," Hayes reported. "Their crystals are reconfiguring themselves." The cascade was transforming, its destructive energy redirecting itself through the quantum network. Across the galaxy, the stolen human technology was awakening, recognizing at last the touch of minds that sought to understand rather than worship. "The core is offering us a choice," Aria said quietly. "It can shut down the entire network, end the hegemony's power forever. Or we can teach them," Quinn finished, looking at Morrison. "Show them how to understand it, like we did. Break the cycle of blind faith and replace it with knowledge." Morrison smiled, thinking of all they'd learned since that first desperate mission. "Aria, send our response. Tell it we choose to teach." The quantum storm subsided as suddenly as it had begun. In its wake, the tactical display showed hegemony ships hanging powerless in space, their crews watching as their divine crystals transformed into something new. Teaching tools, their surfaces now displaying the very scientific principles they'd been built upon. "Sir," Chen called from communications, "we're receiving surrenders from across the hegemony fleet, and messages from their crews. They're asking for teachers." Quinn's hand found Morrison's as they watched the sunrise over Crystallos, the central temple now glowing with a steady, peaceful light. "So what now, Captain?" Morrison looked at his crew. Hayes grinning at tactical, Rodriguez steady at the helm, Chen managing the flood of incoming communications. At Quinn, brilliant and brave, who'd chosen understanding over faith. At Aria's avatar, now interfacing smoothly with the ancient quantum network that had waited so long for worthy students. Now, he said, we do what humanity does best. We learn, we teach, we improve. He squeezed Quinn's hand, and we make sure that knowledge is never again mistaken for divinity. The Defiant hung in high orbit as the sun rose over a changed galaxy. One human vessel had stood against an empire, and one not through force of arms, but through humanity's greatest weapons: curiosity, innovation, and the courage to question everything. And in the quantum network that spanned the stars, ancient human wisdom began to flow freely once more, waiting to teach anyone brave enough to understand rather than simply believe.